My name is Joe Proni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today, I'm not here to teach any lessons. I'm just a guy that 24 hours ago, and I don't believe in the term, putting a dog down. So the term that I would use is that Heidi and I had to, raise Lola up, or in a Stoic philosophy would say it was time for me to give her back to the universe. So it was about 24 hours ago. So I'm still processing this. So I don't have any lessons today. I don't even know if I'm going to air this, to be honest with you. I'm just doing it because I can't get any sleep. It's part of what happens when things are on your mind and they have nowhere to go. So Lola is not here for the first time in about 14 years. And this isn't new. This type of grief, happens to most everybody at some point. We're talking about losing people call it losing a pet, losing an animal. I don't look at it like that. I look at it as a soul. There have been studies shown that you can put a dog under an MRI, and the part of their brain that lights up when they see, the people in their family it shows love, and oxytocin is produced, in the human as well as the dog. So it's been proven that there is a true love and a bond and a connection there. So that's real. And when that bond is broken or detached, at least in a physical sense, there's a lot of grief that goes with that. So real quick, again, playing this out in my head, Lola was a little bit lethargic yesterday. We went for a walk, and she was okay, but a little bit lethargic more than usual. When I brought her back home, she went and sat down in her bed, but she didn't want to eat, and she didn't really want to drink, so I knew something was up. So during the day, we ended up taking her to the emergency vet to see what could be done. Unfortunately, Lola did have lymphoma, cancer. She's been fighting that for a year. The first time through CHOP treatment, she went into remission, so she beat cancer the first time. This time, she actually was in remission, but the way it was explained to me, and don't quote me on this, I'm not a veterinarian, I'm not a doctor, but they said that there's certain things that they can't see on x-rays. It's at a cellular level where organs get attacked. And a couple of weeks ago, she had a fever, and they were able to break the fever by pumping her with antibiotics, and she was fine the next day. And I was hoping it would be the same this time, and she did have a bit of a fever, but they noticed this time that the fever was not caused by an infection because she didn't have one. What it was that her heart was enlarged, and her kidneys were, I guess, that the liver values were up, so her kidneys and her heart were being attacked. And Lola did have a cough, and I noticed on the last day, so they told me to use this one medication to help with the cough. And I noticed that she wasn't coughing, but I thought maybe that might be a bad thing. And it ended up that it was true, that she couldn't get enough oxygen to actually be able to cough. And so that was an issue. So Heidi and I got a call from the veterinary office later at night when they were closed, and they wanted to know if we wanted to see her because it was in a very difficult situation. And what I was presented with was that Lola was basically in a very small, like unoxygenated type of cage, and she was hooked up to all these things. And the only reason why her blood pressure was still relatively okay was because of all these drugs, I think they call them pressors, that create that. And if she were to be taken out of there, she wouldn't be able to survive on her own, and her body was not being able to, fight this anymore. So technically speaking, Lola's like 2 wins and no losses against cancer. But unfortunately, her body got really tired, and it ended up affecting her heart and her kidneys, and there was just no way out of this. So we had to do the most humane thing. About 14 years ago, when I bought Lola, I made that commitment right then that I was going to be, the best person I could be and the best owner I can be, best dad. And I didn't want her to be in any kind of pain whatsoever, in her whole life. And I think we were able to avoid most of that. She's had a good extra year on the chemo, and that worked. Like I said, she went into remission, but this was just too much, and it was just too much for her, and I couldn't put her through that anymore. Throughout her whole life, she's been fed like, better than human being. I mean, fruits, vegetables, chicken, tuna, fish, turkey, lean beef, all great stuff. She's been treated like a queen. I only heard her yelp once in her whole life, and I think she was very young, a couple of months old, and she needed to get a shot, a vaccination, and she yelped a little bit, then went to sleep. But that was the only time. I mean, she's been treated, perfectly. I did the best I can through this, and I take that job seriously. So, what is grief? And again, I'm not doing this show to be entertaining, so if you don't want to be here, that's okay too. I'm doing this for myself because I just can't get to sleep. So, what's grief? It's love that has nowhere to go. Why? Why do we grieve? We grieve because we love. That's why. And therefore, when that's over, it's painful. Which simply means that the more you love, the more you'll end up grieving. So it's kind of like a beautiful pain. At least I keep telling myself that. But the more you love, the more you're going to grieve, and that just makes sense. What's the flip side of that, or what's the way out? Never to love anything, and never to give of yourself. Never connect to anything. That's not a way out either. How do we grieve? That's different for everybody. So I don't know the answer for that for anybody, including myself half the time. When do we grieve? For me, it's right now. This is not processed through. This is part of the process for me. One of the things I found interesting is that sometimes you think you're alone and you're not. Like, people have gone through this for thousands and thousands of years. The ancient Romans were some of the toughest people who ever lived, and they had tombs for their dogs. They had epitaphs. They would have sayings. One of them is that I connect to is this. It says, "I am in tears while carrying you to your final resting place, as much as I rejoiced when bringing you home with my own hands 15 years ago." And that's exactly right for me, except the fact that I carried Lola in the palm of my hand when 14 years ago, not 15. One of the things too that I noticed between the difference between people and when you love animals, it's interesting that I literally looked at her yesterday for the last time. A lot of things came to my mind. is that, you know, when you look at her and you go, she's so old and she's tired. And it's funny, when you love a dog, you don't seem to notice that, you know, as time goes on. Whereas people seem to be very generally interested in how old they're getting all the time. You know, and everybody talks about that, and they do all the cosmetics and everything else they got to do to try to change, you know, to make themselves more attractive. And it's not like Lola was any less attractive because she was older and tired. And I've noticed this with other dogs that I've had, is that, and again, I'm doing this for myself, so I'm not trying to be politically correct here. I honestly don't care. This is for me. I would say that the love for a dog is a lot more pure than it is for a human being. That's just the way it is. I mean, with dogs that I've noticed, it's, you don't notice their age and you don't care, and they don't care either. With human beings, they're so tied up in their ego and how they look, and oh my God, I'm not as attractive as I was, and they feel bad about themselves, and it gets in the way of pure connection and love, I think. At least that's the way I feel about that. You know, I can give you an example. I don't know if I can show this on here, but this is when she was very young. Can you see that picture? You see how dark her face is? I never really noticed how gray, you know, she got. I never really noticed that, honestly. One of the things that's also different, that it's difficult when you're grieving the loss of a dog, because society is not really fully with you. You know, they say, oh, you know, it's like, it's just a pet, you know, it's just a dog. And so that hurts more because there's not a lot of validation there. And I think that there's a lack of empathy. You know, I could say, trying to do this and trying to get out whatever I have to get out so I can have a decent night's sleep, whatever that might be. It's, you know, just some thoughts off the top of my head. This is one of the most difficult things I've ever have to go through or ever been, you know, and I've lost people before, including my parents. You know, and there's a thing there where you always say, okay, well, the dog has to be on a lower position. I don't believe that. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of them, it's like, even when I lost my father, I mean, honestly, I never lived with my father. I mean, I think I did until I was 5, but I don't really remember it. And there was a short time in my 20s when I lived with them for about 2-3 months. But I never knew the inner workings of who my father really was. You know, when my father died, of course I mourned that, but it was a different type of grief. Part of what my grief process was with my father is the fact that we were never that close. You know, I never really knew who he was. We were never, you know, we had that mentality back then of, you know, that the parent is here and the child is kind of here. I mean, you could talk, but we just were not incredibly close in that type of thing. And even, you know, with my mother, who I was closer to, that's a different type of grieving as well. Because even when my mother was at my house, you know, and she was getting older and I wanted to take care of her, she didn't want any part of living with me, you know, and that's kind of funny. Like, you know, she's calling up my sister all the time, get me out of here, I feel like I'm in jail, you know. And of course we got along, but it's different. It's a different type of love when you're dealing with a dog. You know, I had this thought too about, you know, what is it? Why is it so tough for me? You know, why do I feel so connected? And I think it's because dogs really know more than people how to exude unconditional love, unconditional trust, unconditional loyalty. You know, it's difficult when you're in relationships throughout your life with human beings, obviously. And everybody's like, well, I trust you, but only to this degree, or you need to do all of these things before I trust you, and even then I'm going to verify because I don't really trust humans. And when that happens, when people are judgmental, when they don't trust you fully, when they're not fully loyal to you as a person and always have your back, and human beings have a lot of difficulty doing this because they have their own blind spots, they have their own difficulties, so they try to control people. And when this happens, it makes you not live up to the best person that you can be. You know, it becomes like this little mini war between people and relationships. Whereas with the dog, with full, you know, they love you unconditionally, and with this total trusting of you, that it makes you want to live up to that, to be the best you can possibly be. I mean, over the last, it's been a while now, but even more so in the last day since she's not here anymore, I keep tracing over my steps of, did I do good enough? Because she's 100% dependent upon me for her life. And I want to make sure that I did everything possible in order to give her a good life. Not one little fraction less that I want to give. I want to give her everything possible. This made me think about relationships too these days, especially in psychology, when they say like words like, you know, codependent, or, you know, they want people to be completely independent of each other. And I understand that. I actually agree with part of that, with most of it. But I think there's something that's lost in relationships, possibly. I'm just thinking now, I don't know. When you have someone that says, I'm fully dependent, I don't need you, even for like to feel good emotionally, I just don't need you. Now, do you want to be in a relationship with me? Well, I get it, how that can be strong for both people and doesn't leave like one person out to where, you know, they can't take care of themselves after a breakup. But in terms of being connected to another human being, I don't know if that's as good. Because knowing that I'm 100% responsible for Lola and she's dependent upon me, it's not like I look down on a dog because they're dependent. It just makes me want to try harder. You know, and it made me think, well, not that I'm sexist or we want to go back into the 1950s, but, you know, I'm wondering back, you know, if we put the year 2020 mindset on people in 1950s, it's probably not fair. I'm thinking like, what would happen if the man or someone was responsible fully to do things outside the home, let's say? You know, wouldn't they want to be better at it and do it more? Because there was a full trust that they would do it. And that if one person was fully in control of everything that happened at home, I thought, well, wouldn't they want to do the best they can at it? And wouldn't they want to support each other fully? Again, I'm not suggesting this, okay? Again, I'm just thinking, and I'm obviously really hurt right now, so I'm just thinking about, you know, why this amazing connection to dogs that are fully dependent upon you. And I don't think that makes them any less. Listen, if we were out in the woods or the wilds, I'm going to take a dog's chances over mine. So it just so, you know, we're in a house, so obviously, you know, I'm the one who's got to take over. But if we were out in the wild, obviously the dog would have a better chance than me. Gratitude, you know, that's something that human beings don't have. Or they have it a little bit. But dogs are 100% in gratitude all the time. All the time. And you see it every day, and that makes you want to be a better person as well. You know, they say, I think there's this joke, I don't even know if I can remember it now, but if you put your spouse, your partner in the trunk of a car, and your dog in the trunk of a car, and you shut the trunk and you drive around the block a few times, then open up the trunk, you see which one is happy to, you know, which one is happy to greet you. It's going to be the dog, right? So of course we want to be around them. They always care about you and they always love you 100%. You know, what about things like, you know, dogs are assertive too, which I really like. They do create boundaries. They know exactly what they want. You know, the funny thing is I have a lot of videos of Lola, like jumping up on the couch, and she'd hit me on the shoulder because she wants food. And they ask for what they want all the time. And that's one of the things I miss too. I came in the house today and, you know, she hasn't been coming to the door lately, you know, but she would bark when I came in. I don't see that today. When I go to grab something to eat, she comes right over and starts hitting me for food. She's not there for that. Gonna go to bed. She usually goes to bed right. She has her own pillow on the bed. She's not there for that. And if I ever move an inch, she moves next to me. And if I move this way, she's got to touch all the time. So no matter where you are, she's trying to touch you. I knew she was, could have some trouble breathing. She ended up having that problem later on. But so I would run the humidifier on one side of the bed and I would tilt it towards her. I find myself today, trying to go in and fill it up with water. I'm like, for what reason? She's not here. I'm still doing that. I'm still like going, I don't know. It's one of these things too. On Sundays, I usually watch football, and I used to love football. I don't like it as much anymore, to be honest, because there's just not a lot of hitting. They've taken a lot of the aggressiveness out of it. But the excitement of watching people I don't know play football and score a touchdown, it's not that exciting for me anymore. When Lola was diagnosed with cancer back last November, that was during football season as well, like it is now. Every time, it'd be like, I never take anything for granted. Every time, like, Lola would eat breakfast, it's like, yes, she's eating breakfast. Like, yes, we're gonna go to the park. Look, she's still walking. Then at night, sometimes she, would like bug you and she would be eating food. I'm like, it was like, it's better over the last year to watch Lola eat and to be able to do things and to play and to be able to, jump on the couch and do things that she used to be able to do. That was more exciting to me, actually, than watching football games over the last, close to 2 years now. There's just a lot. Technically, I said Lola beat cancer in a sense, but she did not beat old age. She was almost 14, and all her systems were kind of shutting down. It's been a really tough road through this. One of the reasons why I thought I should talk about this, or at least for myself, is that in our society it's not incredibly okay for men to have feelings. And I think, I was one of those that was raised like that. And I know it's changing, but it's a little late in the game for me for that to change. So I was raised in a way that you can't really express much. And I'm pretty sure people don't want to hear me talk about it, in person. So here I am by myself. When we look at suicide rates, men's rates are 4 times higher than women. There's a lot of reasons for that. But I think one of the main ones is because, in general, emotional support, for men is really not as much, as it should be. I think it scares people, when men actually have feelings and they break down a little bit and they actually admit that they're weak in certain situations, or they don't know the answers. It's like, oh, you're a guy, you can grow a beard, so now you have all the answers, right? Like that doesn't work like that. I'm no God, I'm just a person. I was thinking too of, as a person, as a therapist, as whatever, a man, how do you decrease the amount of grief? And on one side, I don't want to, because again, the amount of love that you share is going to increase the grief, so you might as well feel it as much as you can, although it does get in the way of your sleep, I have to say. I did a show with Lola back in 2017. Heidi and I had a show. If anybody's interested, I can probably send it to you. I watched part of it today, and I heard myself talking about grief, and I was a little bit horrified. because I was about 3 weeks out from a bodybuilding show, and I was a lot of time away from where I experienced grief. And so I felt like I came off a little bit callous, you know, and instead of coming from a position of trying to really put myself back in the position of when I felt grief, you know, I kind of took it from like a really powerful position. And I thought that if there was a person who needed to hear that message, they're not going to hear it from somebody who's acting all powerful and strong, because I don't care how powerful and strong you are. If you're really experiencing grief, it's extremely hurtful. I think it's probably the most hurtful thing I could think of. Physical pain can go away. I can make it go away in some ways, and it heals. Emotional pain, it's like, what do you do with it? It's in your head, and I just can't get it out, you know, and it's all there. And the thing is, you don't want to forget, right? Because there's so many good things too, but the good things, there's a cognitive dissonance, right? Because the good things are what's making you feel bad. So you don't want to forget the good things, but when you remember the good things, they make you feel bad. I don't know if I explained that right, but there's just, there's no easy way out, is what I'm saying. It's hurtful all the way through. One of the things that Stoic philosophers would say, it's not the event that causes you the pain. You know, it's your interpretation of the event. So I thought, okay, well, they're smart. They know what they're doing. Let's play the game. Let's do this. So, you know, Lola is like my best friend for 14 years. Every part of my life she's involved with. It's a big part of a reflection of me, of how good of a man I can be to take care of her. And I tried to stand up and do that. And when she's gone, it's like you lose a lot of meaning and purpose. And you just see this poor creature, you know, they have this thing where I've read it so many times. They talk about, like, if an animal looks at you and they have this certain look in their eye, that they'll tell you when it's time. Honestly, I didn't see that. When we went in there to go visit her when she was, you know, very, very sick, I stuck my hand in the thing, went to pet her. She actually raised her head up and she looked at me, and it was like she never had any part of her that was going to quit. And she actually started to roll on her side so I could rub her belly again. I thought that was so funny. There was no part of her that wanted to quit. But going to, like, it's not the event, it's your interpretation of the event. So Lola dies. What's the interpretation? Well, she's dead. It's horrible. I lost my best friend, right? That's the interpretation. I mean, how is it possible to interpret that in a good way? You know, then you start thinking, it's like, well, hold on a second. Every living thing dies. So if you're going against nature, you're going to have a problem. So this is nature. You know, we're all going to die. So you have to be okay with that. If you're not okay with that, you're out of luck, because you can't change that. So let's take it from that standpoint. The minute that I got Lola was, you know, the clock was on. She was going to die at some point. Now let's look at the other things. She almost lived for 14 years. She had an incredible life. She was taken care of in every which way. And I almost had my wish of the way she died. I had planned that I thought maybe she could be home. You know, we could do it that way, that people could come over and give her an injection that way. But she was of a tenuous situation, so we couldn't leave the place. But when she died, she was in my lap. She was in my hands. And she knew I was there. She knew Heidi was there. She knew she was loved. She knew she was cared about. And so in that sense, it's a really good death. So the perception there is, if you're going to have a relationship with something that's alive, either you're going to die or they're going to die. So under the circumstances, this is probably the best possible thing that could happen in that situation, as horrible as it is. Now I just have to deal with the grief side of it. But leading up to that was good. Now about 10 years ago, I wrote a book called From Grief to Relief, and I had some ideas on how to deal with grief, and I had a show that was based on it. That I had the show for like 7 or 8 years. In the beginning, I talk about how to prepare for grief. And so I have to remind myself of this. Like, did I prepare? Well, I never took it for granted, that's for sure. I did everything possible. I probably have like 5,000 pictures of her. I've got multiple videos that I filmed her during our shows. So I still have all of those. And so I was documenting her life. And so, yeah, that's a good way to prepare, is that I made sure that I made use of every single day of her life. How do you confront grief? It's kind of what I'm trying to do now. I'm not trying to run away from it. I'm trying to talk about it. I don't care if it's entertaining. I'm not trying to be entertaining. This is just for me. Like I said, I don't even know if I'm going to put this out there. I don't know if it's worth it for anybody, honestly. It's just for me. But that's how you would confront it. Not run away from it, and just think about the good things, the memories, and then you kind of have to sit in the bad stuff. How do I feel? I feel horrible. This is probably I can't think of too many times in my life that I felt worse than this. It could be debilitating if I let it. It could be leading to a panic attack if I don't get stuff out. Why? Because, you know, I raised her since she was this small. You know, to watch her go through the stages of life. I think one of my friends said it the other day, or actually it was today. He said the biggest crime of nature is that dogs have such a short lifespan compared to people. And I agree with that. Sometimes, you know, nature knows everything, right? But in this sense, I don't know, I think I have to challenge it. I'm like, you're really making my life hard with these dogs with their lives are so short. And the other part is, how do you grow from grief? You know, what lessons do you take? And part of this is that, I don't know if I'm saying this right, but I think dogs are better people than people. You know, they know how to trust, they know how to love, they know how to do things unconditionally. They do know how to make appropriate boundaries. They do know how to tell you what they want, and they're very assertive. They do everything in therapy that we try to tell people to do, they do. All of it. Again, if I was being honest, listen, I'll take a dog over a person any day of the week. You know, working with, you know, and living with Lola and trying to help her through this cancer this last year was a very, very difficult privilege. And I told her that too. Every time she was in my passenger seat and we were going to and from chemo treatments, it was always a difficult privilege, you know, to be there with her, to experience life, to have her fight through it. And she did it like a champ all the way through. And till the end, she still wanted to keep her eyes open. And, you know, and when someone has that much love in their heart, that's where the hurt to me is that she has 100% faith in me, you know, and I think that's what makes me want to be a better person. You know, how many people in my life have I ever known, or how many have you ever known, that have 100% faith in you? Or they just want you to be you, be the best you that you can be, without the judgment, without trying to tell you that you're wrong, without telling you, why are you doing this, you know? Why are you doing that? All these things. You don't get that from dogs. I think I'm going to try to go to sleep in this. At some point, you learn your lessons, and she just taught me so much. My father told me a long time ago that some point, all bills become due and payable. In other words, like with a dog, you get all the fun and the joy and the excitement up front. And then they start to get older, and at the end, you got to pay up. And, you pay up in terms of grief. That's what you do. What's love? Love is a good word. Love maybe is not a feeling as much as it is, what you do for another being. Another definition of love is, what you sacrifice for somebody. And I like to think that I've done those things. I'm going to try to go to bed. I might process this video and put it up, or I might not. I'm not sure yet. So, all right. This is the Rise Above Project.